Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will present using graphics and types. And this is my content. The first part is about using information graphics. Photographs help the reader gain a visual application of reality. Information graphics help the reader understand the massive intangible of the hidden. And the graphics is a good way of communicating lots of information in a hurry. We can say these are map and aerial photo of New York Central Park. We can say that the map of Central Park is better located than an aerial photo of it, because map is easier to locate seats and more concise than aerial photo. In recent years, information graphics, as these illustrations are known, have appeared with increasing regularity in newspaper and magazines, large and small, and on websites. Many believe this transformation was sparked by the arrival of USA Today in 1979, and there is no doubt that it set new stand for the use of color and graphics. Colorful chart, graphics and map play a key role in USA Today, and information graphics help busy people skim newspaper. However, information graphics can be good or bad. Confusing chart, graphics, and map hinder readers rather than help them. On the right is the chart about percent who agreed with court. But in the chart, we can say they didn't have any counting unite, so maybe we will confused about these numbers. It is shown that 55 independent people agree with court, or 55% independent people agree with court. We also cannot count how many people participate in voting. The main purpose of graphics is to help the reader understand complex things or concepts. Including information may be extremely difficult or impossible to describe in words. This is map. Map help reader locate seats with they may not familiar. Tables are used to graphically display number information, and bar chart help the reader visualize quantity, and favor chart shows quantity over time. Pie charts are used to show the division of the whole into components. Process drawing help readers visualize digital plans. Part 2 is about using type. Type is used in the print medium as both body type and display type. Body type is the primary typeface used for the text of a publication story. Display type is that used to highlight, pull quote, and similar items that use large type. Here is a new concept about legibility. If a type is easy to read, it is legible. If it's difficult to read, it's not legible. Almost always, both typeface are chosen for a combination of legibility and set width. Here are other factors to consider based on various legibility studies. Italic type is more difficult to read than Roman or upright type. A line set in all capital letter is more difficult to read than a line set in caps and lowercase. Ornamental and cursive typeface are more difficult to read. Serif, the small strokes at the end of the letter. A serif is relatively fine at the bottom and the top of the letter, such as D, H, I, L. Sans serif type is more difficult to read as body type. Reverse type, white letters on dark background, is more difficult to read. Specification for any particular type may vary in several ways, including point size, typeface, width and width, and style as shown in this chart. A type family includes all variations of the given type with common characteristic. This chart is some members of the futural type family. We need to remember when mixing typeface on the same page, we need to use different members of the same type family. The last section is about how to measure type from a printed page. This figure shows imaginary lines by which letters are created. These lines are called the baseline, on which all letters other than P, Q, and Y rest. The ascender line to which most capital letter and tall letters rise. Where small letters align called the X height of letter. Each line helps in aligning letters. And this is my first question. An aerial photo of the place is usually a better locator than a map of the same area. Who knows the answer? The answer is B. Because a map of the area is easier to set and is more concise. And the second is which one is the definition of legibility? A legibility is the primary typeface used for the text of a publication story. B. Legibility refers to the ease with which a reader navigates a story. C. Legibility is used for highlight, pull quotes, and similar items that use large type. The answer is B. Body type is the primary typeface used for the text of a publication story. And display type is used for the highlight, pull quotes, and similar items that use large type. And that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Any presentation?
Good evening, everyone. Today I will introduce newspaper editing. For more than 300 years, newspaper have been the most comprehensive news media around. Although they have lost much of their immediacy and some of their audience to radio, television, and the web, newspapers still provide unparalleled depth of information, particularly in local news. History has shown that the rise of new media tends not to eliminate previous media, but to take over some of their duties and bring about changes in their business models. To take over some of their duties and bring about changes in their business models. Newspapers will survive for some time in some form, but increasingly they will be read online rather than in print, and editors will increasingly find themselves editing mainly for web audiences. Once material for the newspaper is gathered and edited, it's time to produce the final product. Although the most important part of a newspaper is unquestionably its content, a close second is the newspaper's design, which plays a critical role in selling it to readers. To start off, I will talk about the objects of newspaper design. First, the design should organize the news. And every design should show readers know which stories are most important. The design staff should place stories adjacent to other similar stories in clearly labeled sections of the paper. Organization also covers each individual page. Page designers have many ways of telling readers which stories are most important. By placing them at or near the top of a page, by placing them in boxes, and by setting their headlines in large type. The second one is the design should create an attractive page. Good design should be attractive to most readers. An attractive design invites readers to come into a page and read the news. Third, the design should complement the stories. Some stories need a second doc or a blurb to add more details than a single headline could provide. Some stories need pictures to get them across clearly. Some stories need graphics or charts, such as a list of main points from a speech or budget proposal. Sometimes the main story on the front of a feature section will use a different headline type that reflects the subject matter better. The next one is the design should be interesting and dramatic. The design editor can vary story shapes or design stories into strongly vertical or horizontal shapes. Stories can be boxed, run over color tints, or run with multiple photographs. The last one is the design should reflect contemporary culture. The next part is about newspaper and the principles of artistic design. The application of artistic design principles can help design editors achieve their objectives and carry out their responsibilities. The principles most applicable to newspapers are known as balance, contrast, and unity. First, balance means equilibrium. In other words, a page should not be overwhelmingly heavy in one section or extremely light in another. Top heaviness is the most common form of imbalance in newspaper design, caused by placing large or bold headlines at the top while using almost insignificantly light headlines at the bottom. As a result, readers' eyes tend to gravitate toward the border section of the page and away from the lighter portions. The easiest way to think of balance is to imagine a line down the center of the page from top to bottom and another across the middle of the page from left to right. Then weigh the most outstanding element at the top of a page against similar headlines at the bottom, particularly in the opposite quadrant. So if there is a strong graphic element in the upper left quadrant, it should be balanced by a graphic element in the bottom right. The second principle is contrast. Contrast is the principle of using at least two or more elements on a page, each of which is dramatically different from the other, so that the page appears lively and interesting. It can be achieved in four general ways: by shape, size, weight, and direction. First, shape contrast may consist of a story set justified in opposition to another story set flush left, ragged right, or ragged right, or a profile of a person may be used with a rectangular picture. The second one is size contrast. It may be achieved by using a large illustration on the same page as a smaller one, or large type with smaller type. The next one is weight contrast. It may employ a picture that appears black with a lighter picture, or a headline set in boldface type contrasted with one set in letter typefaces. The last one is direction contrast. It will show vertically shaped stories next to horizontally shaped stories. And the last principle is unity. The principles of unity create a single impression in page design. A unified page appears as if everything is in its correct position, and the page is therefore interesting. And the editor plans for a unified page by keeping the design of the entire page in mind at all times, while working on any part of it. Each story, therefore, must be visually weighed against all other stories. Then here comes the MCQ. The first question is, in what ways will the rise of new media influence traditional media? The answer is A and C. Take over some of their duties and change their business models. The next one is, the principles most applicable to newspapers are known as the answer is A and C and E. Balance, contrast, and unity. The last one is, which one is not the general way of contrast? The answer is B, location contrast. And then there is my references. That's all. Thank you.
With our first design project, the broadsheet, I wanted you to acquaint you with broadsheet. I've actually not taught broadsheet in an editing class before, just because it's kind of a large format, and I don't know, most student newspapers are tabloid and so forth, so I never bothered to teach broadsheet. But I think it's good to familiarize you with broadsheet and the difference in sizes by actually having you do a broadsheet page. And also, as far as the order we went in, I think this is good in that probably the most important objective in the first design project is for you to become comfortable with Quark, and start to learn all the other stuff. Certainly start to learn the design rules and standards and strategies. But the second one, I'm going to expect a lot better quality for several reasons. First off, you have 3 weeks, and you already know your stories. You're using the same stories. You can drop one story out. You don't have to use all 6 stories. You can use, if you have 6 stories, most of you had 5, I guess, 5. You probably use them all because you have to fill up page 2. Unlike project 1, or the first design project, you didn't have to fill up page 2. But in this one you do. But you may find you're having to cut some stories in your second design project because 2 tabloid pages are together the size of one broadsheet, or about approximately, maybe a little bit bigger. Just because I gave you a small broadsheet and I'm giving you a large tabloid, basically. So again, when a printer will only buy a certain, they don't buy every size of paper. So if I go to a printer and I say, I want you to print for me a tabloid newspaper every week, and I negotiate a price with them, they tell me what sizes they can give me, because there are lots and lots of different sizes of broadsheet, and thus lots and lots of different sizes of tabloid. And so, for example, when I went to the closest one, at least one of the closest ones, the one that gave me the best price for sure, and he only had a short tabloid, meaning that my bilingual newspaper that you've seen pages from was only like 12 inches high, whereas I'm having you do one that's 17 inches high. There's a big difference between 12 inches high and 17 inches, and that's the spread of different rolls of newspaper. The rolls of newspaper are very large. They weigh about 1,000 pounds, or half a ton, typically, and they may vary a little bit depending on whether they're big size, what size they are exactly, but they weigh approximately a half a ton, and so you have to store a lot of paper at any one time. The newspaper I worked at every day used 24, they averaged 24 rolls of paper a day, which means that's 12 tons of paper a day. Well, you have to have a big warehouse to say you want to have a month's worth of supply. Well, you've got to multiply 12 tons by 30. That's a lot of space to store your paper. So, as I said, most newspapers do not store that much paper. They don't store enough paper to have a lot of variety in sizes. That's my point. So most newspapers do not have their own presses. So even, I think I mentioned to you, even the newspaper that I used to work for, the daily paper I used to work for, it had a multi-million-dollar press, but I don't know whether it broke down, but for whatever reason, I think it probably broke down and they decided it wasn't worth fixing it. And so they are now just sending their PDF to a city about 100 miles away. And is actually a competing newspaper. They overlap maybe 20 miles of coverage or 30 miles of coverage. And so even though it's a competing newspaper, they send their PDFs over to Yakima, the neighboring city, and Yakima prints their paper for them. They have a newer press. They do a lot of work. They used to do work for me. And then they every day ship all those newspapers back in trucks, back 100 miles for distribution before, in the middle of the night, basically. They have to do it in the middle of the night. So the cost of a big press is very high, multi-millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. Not everybody is going to have one. Most weeklies will not have one. You're almost certainly going to be a daily newspaper to afford a big press. And as I said, even some of the dailies now are not bothering. They're paying other people to do their printing. So the whole thing is very, very expensive and complicated. The press of the newspaper that I was working at before was about it took a room about as big as one floor of this building, but it took 3 floors. So the press is tall and it's big. And so again, it takes a lot of space. Your papers takes even more space. So you have to just pay a lot of money just for the building to get going. Okay, anyway, so I'm just trying to catch you up here a little bit on perspectives. So the tabloid, meanwhile, we're using a big tabloid. 17 is a big one. As I said, my bilingual paper was only 12 inches high. So it's a lot different. The size I gave you for the broadsheet was a small broadsheet. So they're not, the 2 tabloids in this case, our 2 tabloids are bigger than one broadsheet that I gave you. But by definition, a tabloid is half the size of a broadsheet, but there's different sizes of broadsheet and different sizes of tabloid. As I continue to work just a little bit on this page, I started this, of course, on Monday while you guys were finishing your broadsheet. And one of the a couple of things I've changed since then. First off, in the lecture, I made this hammerhead of dark blue. I started thinking about it and decided it would show up okay in white. So I went ahead and went white on it. And then I didn't have a caption for it, and I'm just giving you my thought process. Not all design is well thought out ahead of time, and I did not think this out ahead of time. But I decided, well, I need a caption, so I wrote a caption, and then I decided, well, I really don't want to take more space underneath this photo, so maybe I'll put the caption on top of the photo. And then I put the caption on top of the photo, and then I decided, well, this caption reads in such a way it could be a blurb. And so what you're seeing here is basically a blurb that used to be a caption. It's valuable because we've been talking about blurbs. And in one of the last presentations, one of you is talking about blurbs and their use in magazines. And as I mentioned, newspapers are using more and more magazine strategies. And so what you see here is really kind of a magazine strategy that you starting to see more with newspapers. And what some of the presenters anyway of when they were talking about blurbs, with magazines, you might even reverse this. You might put the headline below and put the blurb on top. So the blurb could go up here if you're going to do this in a magazine. And your headline, your hammerhead in this case, could go below it. Now that is very seldom done in newspapers, but it looks okay. And as I said, we are adopting more magazine style to newspapers. So we could really do either one. The main reason why I've chosen to put the hammerhead on the top, however, is that it's just coming space-wise. It's just coming down too close to the gal here on the mountaintop, kind of pressing a little bit high there. So my preference is to have the hammerhead above and the blurb below. But this would work. I'm just showing you that this would work. With the right picture, right story, right situation, not only can you put your headline over a photo, you could use even more magazine style than we typically do in newspapers. So this is an example. I'm going to go ahead and bring this back down and put like I said, my preference is to have the hammerhead up top and the blurb underneath it, so that it doesn't, and it's over here to the left, so it leaves plenty of room around the hiker. So something like that. Maybe get a little more space. Another thing I did, however, and we're talking, our last presenter was talking about unity and so forth. So there are several concepts she was talking about. One is contrast. We want to have contrast in photos. We want to have contrast in headlines. And so certainly the hammerhead has a high contrast with other headlines that you see here. This photo, the mountain photo, is a lot bigger than the photo below, but there's something you should notice about this. I've talked about it before, but this is probably the perfect example of this. The picture down at the bottom is almost as powerful as the picture on top. And in fact, I would entertain an argument that it may be more powerful. Why is the picture at the bottom challenging the picture at the top for being powerful? Anybody? Wake up. Why is the picture at the bottom challenging the picture at the top for being having more power, more weight, if you could say? why would you say it's, why could we argue that it's in some ways heavier, that it's, I don't think it's quite heavier, but it's challenging the one at the top as far as center of focus in and of itself. Why? Talked about it before, but what's going on with the bottom photo that makes it more powerful than its size? Let me put it that way. Hello? We'll not talk at once. I can't hear you all at once. Okay, the bottom one has a much bigger image inside of it. And that big image inside that photo makes it gives it more weight. And so that biker is obviously many, many times bigger than the hiker. And so even though the photo is smaller, it's challenging the one at the top in its how much attention it'll grab. In other words, what I'm calling power, weight, you can call it weight, because of that image inside the photo. I think, of course, what I try to do is compensate by having the headline, the big headline within the photo, by having a second photo. Your center of focus does not depend on just one photo. You can have several photos together and create a package that will give you some weight. But you should be very, very aware, and this is what I'm trying to draw your attention to, very, very aware that a photo with a big image inside of it can have more power than another photo with a small image inside of it. And so it should influence and should. The only reason why I put it at the bottom was because the story was not as related to the university, the Xiamen University, where the students were writing for. And so the mountain story was more appropriate to put to the top, and so I put it to the top. But in some ways, I have regrets because the photos were more powerful that went with the motorcycle story. So I could be tempted. In fact, maybe I will do another demonstration and flip those around and put the motorcycle story to the top and show you the difference. Another thing I did when I was on Monday, I had this photo here, clear up here someplace. And that really bothered me as I looked at it later. And so I brought it down in order to make more of a golden triangle and to separate it from the other ones. And I think this makes a big difference to bring that down further. I don't normally like to put photos at the bottom of a story, as I'm doing here, as this one is. But this is an example where the unity of the whole page is more important than the design of one story. And so I think in this case it's justified to bring that photo down to create that golden triangle and so forth. But then I realized, let me pull this out of here. When I stopped on Monday, we had a lot of gray space over here in the left, a lot of gray space. Now there's actually two ways to handle this. One is to bring this photo over into the center. And that's a very good solution. I'd have to obviously put the subheadline into one column. And I would be hesitant if I put one of these columns of text clear over in the column 4, I would be hesitant to put the byline here on the side of the photo. I'd have to look at it real carefully before I decided whether that would be confusing. Because as the critique sheet mentions, one of the most important things that do not confuse the reader. So if there's any reason why they would be confused, it is dark. When we blow in, it is bold. It is italicized, so it might not. It is very possible that I could leave it on the side and not feel too concerned about confusing the reader. And so that might actually be even a better solution, is to move that photo over into columns 2 and 3, and then more of a triangle. But let's say we don't do that. and I wanted to show you and teach you how to use shadow boxes. And so here's a couple that I've used, that I've developed in other tutorials. One thing I want to point out, I did different colors. How do you choose a color? Let me change the color here a second, just to show you what's wrong, when it can look bad. I'm going to choose on this shadow box here, I'm going to change it to green. Okay, and put it back here. Get this one out of the way. Does that look good? Why or why not? That green box look good there. Why not? It may be hard for you to express, may be hard for you to identify why, but it doesn't. It doesn't look good. And part of this is going back to unity. There's no green anyplace else on this page. Suddenly right here, bam, there's green. If that top photo was of a forest, you had forest and grass and you had green in your top photo, that green in the shadow box would be okay. But there's no other green anyplace else on the page. And so it just seems like it just doesn't belong there. It doesn't belong there. And so if I change this, I created a new color called Dusty, and I created it out of by mimicking the color up here in this photo. Now, I started off with blue, obviously for a reason. Blue, I tried to match, at least I did match some of the blue in this photo. So that was the first thing I did, was I went to the most dominant photo, or the color that was blue. But then, just to show that it could still work, I matched the brown. There's several browns in this photo. Even this motorcycle has a little brown tint to it. And so they have a tool here called the color picker. And the color picker allows you to point it. You may be familiar with it in Photoshop and some other programs. I can just point at a color and it will copy that color. And so I pointed at this photo here, the light part of this brown background, and created a color that I call Dusty. And so this color here matches the brown up here in this picture. And there are some other browns on the page, not this quite the same shade, but there are some browns on this page. And so I think the brown is okay. It doesn't jump out and hit you over the head and make you want to throw up. So this took me a long time to learn, partly because we didn't use color. When I first started my career, color was very, very expensive. And so hardly any newspaper in the whole world did any color. Gradually, the color became less expensive. We started using what's called spot color. Spot color is just, this color here could be considered a spot color, in that you could just mix that color, put it on a press, and just print that color of blue on an ad or on a pull-out quote or whatever you want to use it for. You could just mix that one color, put it in one press unit, and print that one color. When you're printing full color, like the full color photos, you're using 4 colors, which means you're using 4 presses, unless you have, maybe there's some brand new presses that don't need four press units. But one press is going to print black, one's going to print cyan, which is a bluish color, one's going to print magenta, which is a reddish color, and one's going to print yellow. And those 4 colors make all other colors. And so when you print a color photo, you have to use primary colors, which for most newspapers is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. TV uses RGB, red, green, and blue, as primary colors, and creates their primary colors out of those 3 colors. But presses typically use the 4 colors that I mentioned. So in the old days, that's one reason why it's so expensive. is that they had to use 4 press units, put color in those 4 press units. The paper had to go through all 4 press units to create their color. And mostly is labor that they charge money for, because after they printed some color, they had to clean out the press and get all that color out of the press. So they charged a lot for that. So we only started using very much color like halfway through my career. Early 90s, they started using more color. In the 2000s, it became very cheap, and so everybody's using color now. But that was around year 2000 before it really got cheap enough that everybody decided, yeah, it's worth it. Let's go for color. So consequently, what I'm saying is, when I was at the university, nobody talked to me about color combinations. And so when we started using color, I made some really bad decisions. I basically was using that green color in a place like that without understanding how colors would complement each other or would not. And so it is important for you to understand that. So if you decide to do a shadow box, you should be looking at other colors on that page and trying to have a unified color scheme. And let me show you how to use this picker real quick. I'm not, I'm going to kind of start from scratch here. So I'm going to pull all these other, because I want you to know how to do a quote box, a pull-out quote as well. So let me zoom in here and show you how to do that. Somebody asked in one of my classes, do we have to learn how to do a shadow box? You should. It's important enough that Quark and InDesign have both added specific tools to make shadow boxes. They both think it is an excellent way of doing pull-out quotes and things like that. As I may have mentioned before, every newspaper has its own, not only its style of writing, like the AP Style book. They also have style of design. And so that's where we've kind of come into a little bit of conflict. I told you that I wanted boxes around. I wanted you to use the box scheme. And if you had 2 stories next to each other, you boxed one. That's one way, and that does influence how you design a page. You do not want 2 boxes next to each other. If you can figure it out, like I did in this page, I avoided 2 boxes at all. So on this page, I have 1 box, the one around the mountains, the hiking story is the only box on the page. So but that influenced the fact that I choose a style of boxing boxing one of the stories that is next to another story. That influences my design, because I purposely want to, if I can, have only 1 box on the page. If I'm going to have 2, I'm going to want one up the maybe upper left and one at the lower right, and have them apart from each other as much as possible. And so if I were to put if I were to put 5 stories on this page, then probably I would have I would move. Well, I'd probably end up with a one story. I'm not sure. Maybe I'd move it the other way. Yeah, no, I'd put the box in the lower right. Probably just a 1-column box, a one column story in the lower right. Box it and push this motorcycle story over to 3 column. Make it a 3 column story instead. If I were going to do 5 stories on that page. Anyway, stylistically, the same design editor that taught me the concept of boxes instead of lines, also the style he set up for our newspaper was pull out quotes, use shadow boxes. The strategy behind it is a shadow box. The whole point of at least the main point of a pull out quote is to create a graphic impact, is to do away with all this gray over in the lower left. Basically, that's the main reason to have a pull-out quote. You don't have a good photo to put in there. There are there's no other photo for this story. There's not enough room for this story up here. And so there's no option. There's not much of an option anyway, other than a pull-out quote in this area. No photo can go up here. I've got to do something to cut down on the gray on the left. The other option was, I mentioned, move this picture here over into columns 2 and 3. That would have solved it. But I'm going to solve it the other way with the pull-out quote. You'll find yourself at times needing a graphic, and you don't have a map, you don't have a chart, you don't have a photo. Every so often you're going to need a pull-out quote. And again, our design editor said, let's put it in a shadow box, give it more graphic impact, not less. So we're not going to draw a line and put in big letters for the pull-out quote. We're going to do the shadow box. We're going to do this up big, make it as colorful, and not all of them had color in them. That's a choice. You don't have to put color in them, but you have more options with a shadow box than you do by just trying to put some lines in and throw in a pull-out quote. It has more graphic impact, which is the point of it, have graphic impact. So again, coming in here, and I think I'll go to 200% for this demonstration so you can see it better. So I'll go up under View and go to 200. I don't know why they don't have a keyboard command for that, but they don't. So I want to make sure you see what's happening here. One thing, however, because I already have text in here, I can't, I need to start off with a text box, and I can't really put a text box in here because it thinks I want to click into the text box that already exists. So I do need to go over to the side to start this. So I'll go over here, and I'll go ahead and create a text box over to the side. And then I will pull it over once I get it under development a little bit. Important point, and by the way, I have already created a video, so you can watch the video if you want to do a pull-out quote. You can do it step by step with me. Anyway, that's already on Moodle. You cannot do a shadow box without having some color in the background of your text box. Let me say that again. You cannot do a shadow box without having some color in the background of your text box. However, the color can be white. White is not the same as empty. Right now it's empty. There's no background color to this. I can put white into it and it'll be okay. So I can choose up here. Oops. You notice in your color palette that you have 3 icons here. One is, when you touch it, it says frame. That means frame. You understand that? Next one is your text, and the third one is your background. So I can go down here and choose white, and you can see no difference. But it is a difference. It has white in it now. And so it will allow me to do a shadow box because there's white in the background of this text box. Without putting white in it, I cannot do a shadow without doing some color. I'm going to start off just with white, and then I'll change the color later. I can start with the text, or I can make the shadow first. It doesn't really matter. But as long as I'm blowing up this big and I see a quote right next to it, I'll pull out a quote here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one right here. Such moments, I'm proud to be from Kazakhstan or born in Kazakhstan, whatever. Again, we do not extract the pull-out quote from the story. We copy it. Then we move over and we put it into the box and paste it in. I'm using keyboard commands, Control-V to paste. I need the name of the person, so I have his name right here. And I'll go in here and enter, put a dash or a hyphen, space, name. Now your typically your quote should be both dark and italics, and it should be bigger. Probably around 14 point is a good size. This morning I did one at 18 point. I have done some quite small, even 10 point, in order to have a little bit of graphic in a half column box. That's really small for a pull-out quote, but I did it again. I was desperate to have some graphic in a column, and I decided to have a half column shadow box in a one column, and I had to go with a fairly small type to do that. Okay, so we have 14 point here. The name, the attribution typically goes flush right, and so again under in your text command you can go. Actually, that'd be, I believe that's under paragraph. Excuse me, paragraph. You're going flush right. Typically, it's smaller. This is 10 point now because I just copied it out of the text. So having a 10 point attribution, 14 point text is okay. You could go up a little bit bigger than that, but you want quite a bit of contrast. You're not trying to emphasize the name too much. And so rather than 10, I can go maybe 11, maybe to 12. As long as I go light face, it'll probably be okay. We may, again, the newspaper make the style. They might decide not to have any indent on a pull-out quote. I took it off of one of my pull-out quotes, and I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings. But one thing that is most common is that this will be flush left. So the attribution's flush right, going back to paragraph, and the quote itself is flush left. Give you a little more space in here, and it just looks a little better. Not the false spaces between the words and so forth. Okay, so we have a pull-out quote. Now, a couple of things you have to do. One, don't have any shadow yet. Also, we'll need to push away from the edges. Right now, we have probably, I'm not sure what color the frame is, but if we were going to just have white in the inside, we might just have black as the frame. It may still show up as blue here, just kind of a default color. But if when you click into it and click into the frame, if it says black, then it's black, even though it looks blue. It'll turn black later. Again, I mentioned, I showed you before, at least some of you, that you can take a look at this stuff under View and go down to View Sets, and you can go to Output Preview, and this will show you what it'll look like with all those without all the lines in the back and so forth. So this would allow me then to again go back to View, and I would think that it would get rid of that blue line and make it black. What happened here? I don't think I killed it. Oh, there it is. Well, it still looks blue. I guess I'm out here in the palette, or the paste up area. Maybe it'll change when I take it in. I don't know. It looks blue, but it says black. I believe it's going to be black. Okay, then as far as the shadow. So we have it marked here. Down below, notice this is important enough to both InDesign and Quark that it has a special tools for shadow boxes. So I'll start off just by clicking that and showing you that it won't do anything probably. It's not going to do anything yet because there's a little box here that's behind my my video pause button that I have to click on before the shadow is going to show up. So I'm going to have to move Quark out of the way and then click on this little box here. You're seeing though that I'm getting shadow not where I want it. I'm getting shadow on the words, not on the box. Now, why would that be? And that is an option, by the way. You can do shadow on the words if you want to. You do not have to. I'm going to, you have some other controls over shadow down here. I did not think I we'll come back and address the shadow on the text in a second. Anyway, over here, I'm going to use some of these buttons. There's one here about the color of the shadow. You have one on the opacity of the shadow. You have the shadow, the skewing the shadow. Well, here's one that I prefer to use, the shadow distance. I'm going to work on that a little bit, and that is how we're still just doing the wording and not the box for some reason. Okay, I'm going to undo that, take that down, and I need to well, I'm going to right-click this. You can approach this from several different directions. One is down here on the palette, and one is in the Modify command. I right-click to get to Modify. So I'm going to see what's going on in here, and check out some stuff here to. I'm not seeing anything that telling me exactly why, and I know I didn't leave it in this condition because I just was using it. I'm not exactly sure why I'm getting the shadow on that and not on the box. Let's try it again. Maybe I'm going to go over to the frame. No, it's still not going to do it. I still need to be in here. Well, I'm going to move this over into the, well, you know, I wonder if, even though I put white in it, if it really accepted the color. If that's, see, it doesn't, it has lots of opacity here, or contrary, it has almost no opacity. I am going to put it a different color. It is, okay, here it says none. I clicked on white, but it did not take it. So that's the problem. Okay, there it is now. Okay, so now that I successfully got white in it, maybe I clicked on white again to demonstrate it. Now I'm getting the shadow in the box and not in the words. So make sure, again, I told you, you have to have color in that box, even if it's white. I thought I put white in it. Apparently I didn't, and so it was putting shadow on the words, not on the box. Once I clicked on white again and it put white into the box, then the shadow went to the box. Okay, going back down here, you can increase the shadow like that. You can also move it around, like if the sun is shining from a different direction. So if I go over here, for example, I can say the sun is shining from below instead of above. Oops, up here where I wanted to go. Anyway, you can go different angles, different directions. This one here is for blurring it. This one here is, I'm not seeing a lot of difference between this scale and distance, but if we do scale, you see it gets big real fast anyway, let me put it that way. We can bring this down again, put it more normal. But you can also, I don't know why you'd have it on both sides, but it will allow you to do that. So you monkey with it, and I'm going to try to get it back to where I want it. So I want it to be, I'll go this way. I'll do the shadow over to the, so the sun's shining to the right instead of from the left. And I'm going to, a couple of things we have to do here. We have to do the runaround. They have a way of doing it with, here's a runaround drop shadow. And it seems, it didn't even take it. Why didn't it take it? I don't know. I get different results when I click that button, and I don't know why. Maybe because I put synchronize. No, that would be something. Maybe. Let me turn off the synchronize and see what happens if I turn off synchronize. No, it still doesn't do it. Don't know. But I prefer to do it by hand anyway. And so I'll go to the runaround here, and I will remember when you do runaround, you have to, again, it's hiding behind my pause button, but I can still get to it here because there's a dropout menu here. Before you do runaround, you have to hit item. That may also be why over here this didn't take. Yeah, it is. Okay, so the automatic runaround did not take because I had not chosen item in the runaround command. So now it has run around a little bit. I still kind of, well, this is the quickest way to do it, is to hit the runaround drop shadow. But even then, it's not perfect. You see over on the right, we don't have enough space over on the right side. And so I don't quite trust that, and once before it gave me way too much space. So I don't quite trust this runaround drop shadow. You can try it, but instead I would rather go and go back to the runaround and start increasing it here individually. And so here on the left side, I can just, this got to go be like 12 point to get it out of the shadow, or 13 point. So it's 11 now, 12, about 13 point, the way I draw the shadow to get it away from the shadow so you can read the text. On the right side, I just need about 6 to get it further away from the edge. That's 5, that looks fine. Sometimes you have to put some on the bottom, but it depends just how this box settles into the text. Right now, the bottom line and the top line are both far enough away from it that I don't need to do anything with top and bottom. But here are tops and bottom. If I needed some more, I would do it over here. Now I also needed some runaround on the inside. So you can't have the text on the inside touching the box either. And that's where, when we go back to the, I think it's the drop shadow, we're going to, let me see, not synchronize, let me see, or is this the right place? No, not there. Maybe run around here also. No, not run around. The drop shadow. Okay, it's the text box. You need it in the text box. You have you do have a button here that says run text around all sides. And so at this one, you only have one box, one option here lit up. because as you click on this one, it's going to do all sides, top, bottom, left, and right. And so I'm just going to increase it here. We saw the name line jumped out of the box, but we can increase the size of the box. That's not a problem. So if you click this little box here, then you just you can inset the text on all sides simultaneously, like that. So you need to do the run around the outside. You need to do the inset on the inside of your box. Okay, so we have a shadow box. Let's go ahead and do the color again, and I'll show you how to use the pick tool, and then we'll be wrapping this up a little bit early today, as I mentioned. So I'm going to go out to Control 0, so we can see the whole page. This time I'm going to choose this darker brown. That seems a little dark, but I'm going to try that, and I'm going to pick that color. So going over here to the color palette, I click on this button here, the pick button in the lower left of this palette. And now all I have to do is go point at. Everybody take a look at this. Everybody's doing other stuff right now, but you need to know how to use the pick tool. I may ask a question on a test. So I clicked on this button to choose the pick tool. I go to a photo or whatever, and I point at what new color I want to create. I just click on that color, and I check it out here. I check out the color over here to make sure that's what I'm satisfied with. That is really dark. I don't think that's going to fit. That's going to be right. So I'm going to go back to this photo here, a little bit lighter color. Maybe I will maybe I'll choose a color here in this mountain picture that's a little darker than the one I used before. It's more of a gray color. So I'm going to choose that gray color instead. It's kind of a grayish blue. If I want to save that color, then I hit this plus button over here to the right of it, the lower right. And I get the color box, color window up, so I can name it now. This is, for some reason, coming up automatically RGB. I mentioned most presses are CYMK, but it gives me the option of going back to CYMK, like that. Not much, for our purposes, there's no difference because we're not printing anyway. But I'm going to call this gray-blue, I guess. Blue-gray, I don't know, something like that. Blue-gray. And hit OK. I could adjust it a little bit here. Again, this color is made up of if you look at these percentages, that's telling you what percentage of cyan it is. It's 72% cyan, it's 44% magenta, it's 27% yellow, and it's about 8% black. That's how I made what this blue-gray is made up of. So we could adjust that a little bit here if we chose to. We didn't think it just right. We could adjust these numbers or adjust these levers, you could call them, I guess, and adjust that color. But I think that color is fine. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to unclick the picker. And with the box showing, I'm going to go find blue-gray. Up here, blue-gray. So my box turns blue-gray. I'm going to come back into that and go to 200% again. So view 200%. And the black is showing up okay, but it's still one that might be better having white type in it. And so going to white type, I'm just going to go to the color palette again. There's a couple places where I can do it. One is here. If it selects, notice it's again resisting me for some reason. I do not know why it's resisting moving. That caused me problems before. So if I don't want to do it, if it's not reacting there, then I can go to the text command, and I need to go to the text tool up here. Now I can go to the text command down here and change the color here. So here's the text color currently, and I can change it to white there. I should be, I need to select I need to select it to do it there. So I'm going to click in and select it. And maybe that's what I had to do over here. I guess I did, and now it's showing up. So even though I would think over here, the color where it's next to frame and background, I wouldn't have to select the type inside of the box, but I do, apparently. So now I can change it to a different color, white in this case, and we've got white text with a blue-gray background. We'll go out and see if that color is okay. And I think that blends okay. That creates some unity. In fact, maybe more. That may be the best color we made yet. There's enough gray in the top, and there's even some grayish colors in the motorcycle picture. And so that may be as good as any of the colors we've created, maybe even better. Again, just wanted to go through some things that you can do to enhance. I started to say earlier, and let me amplify further, do you have to do a shadow box? The answer is no, you don't have to do a shadow box. But I am going to grade you by how good your page looks. I mean, how artistic it is part of the grade. And especially as we go into these next two projects, I'm expecting you to be more artistic. So does that mean a shadow box? Not necessarily. Does it mean type over a photo? Not necessarily, but it could. That's one of those things you could go take a picture that goes with one of your stories and purposely take the picture with the idea of putting a headline over the top of it. You know, having some sky in the background, take a picture of the buildings here and make sure there's some sky in the background, put your headline in the sky, or maybe there's other ways of doing it if you find, but you need to have something that makes sense. You could, if you were taking a picture, like we're going to see some pictures today, a lot of these photographers that are at this photo award that participated in the photo competition took ocean pictures. The ocean makes a good background for text. Anyway, there's a lot of places where you could find a way to do it. You could possibly a photo of soccer players, if you can get enough green background from the turf, get at a higher angle, maybe. I don't know. You'd have to think about, plan it out how you would do that. But so a shadow box necessary? No, it's not necessary. If you plan to be an editor of a newspaper or magazine, you should learn it, because again, Quark thinks it's important enough to give it its own tool. And so if it thinks it's important enough, then obviously a lot of publications are using it. So it's good for you to learn how to do it. And it's at least one possible thing that you could put into a layout that would show more artistic and technical capability that might impress me and get you a better grade. So do you have to? No. Should you learn how to use it? Yes. Do you have to use it in the next assignment? No. But you should be capable of doing it. And when we get to the magazine assignment, now everything's going to go crazy. Magazine assignment, there's no standards. So the tabloid, we have some standards. I still expect you to keep the standards that I set up in my critique sheet. But that critique sheet was made for newspapers. It wasn't made for magazines. And I'm not even sure where to start. I mean, I could take some stuff out of the critique sheet and call it a magazine critique sheet. Maybe that's what I'll do, is redo that to make it a magazine critique sheet. But some of the stuff that I put down for critique for a magazine would be very vague, artistic. Like, for example, I'd have to have put something in the magazine about having artistic value or something artistic, I don't know, something about artistic. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to do it when we get to the magazine. Because the magazine, like I say, there's no exact standard. There's no norms. Every magazine is different than another magazine. So I'm going to give you lots of leeway on the magazine, which will make it, well, on one hand, I was going to say it's going to make it easier, but I don't know if being more creative is easier. It's going to be different because you'll have to be more creative. You may have to think about it a little bit more, maybe look at some magazines to get some ideas. But it'll be easier in the sense that you're more familiar with the technology, certainly. You're more capable of doing things like shadow boxes and type over photos and stuff like that. You know how to do drop caps. Most, a lot of magazines use the drop caps, so that's something you probably will be using. But there's no uniformity by any means, not like, at least not nearly as much as in newspapers. So I will stop there. Unless anybody has any questions. Anybody have any questions? If not, I'll stop because I'm supposed to go over to that photo awards thing, and so I'm going to do that. So, okay, thank you.